Now that it's June, one of the main NFL storylines that you're going to be seeing throughout the next coming weeks are the remaining free agents and where they're going to call home in the 2025 season. What's going on, Broncos Country? My name is Moose. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. And on today's episode, that's exactly what we're going to be exploring. Could the Broncos be in the market to make one last splash defensive signing? And I'm sure you've already seen him on screen for long enough now. Kyzir White is the player that I want to talk about at the moment. So a little bit about White and kind of where he comes from and what he's doing currently in the NFL. As a former fourth-round pick by the Chargers back in 2018. He actually played his rookie season as a defensive back, which I kind of find funny. But he put on some size. He's always had the height that you're looking for. Turned 29 years old in March, so he is an NFL veteran. And, by the way, coming off of a second career high, so not his career high, but his second most tackles in a singular season with 137. The first time he did it, or his most, I should say, was back in 2021, where he had 144 tackles. And in 2024, we're talking about a player that not only was a blanket over the middle of the field, but we're talking about a player that put up some very, very good numbers as a linebacker. Now, again, is this a player that the Broncos need? No, they don't need him because the linebacker room is set currently with the starters and two players that we'll talk about later on in the episode. But Kyzir White could be a cheap insurance piece for the Broncos and this linebacker room. Now, the reason I say that is because there is no secret out there that the one area of the Broncos defense that everybody has a question mark around right now is the linebacker room. Not in terms of talent, but in terms of health. Are they going to stay healthy? That is the biggest question. Now, Gary Davenport, who is a writer for the Bleacher Report, he actually was talking about Kyzir White finding a home and kind of what he brings to the table, and actually listed the Broncos as a team that could vie in for Kyzir White's services. He said, for starters, experience, White has been a full-time starter in 3 of the past 4 seasons, including experience wearing the green dot, which is the communicator, the mic linebacker, directing traffic defensively. He also has been productive. In 3 of the past 4 years, White has eclipsed 100 total tackles. He's also been good for the occasional big play, registering 7.5 sacks and 6 career interceptions. All this to say that Kyzir White is your typical off-ball linebacker. And if you're not familiar with the term, because there is an on-ball and an off-ball linebacker, very simply put, an off-ball linebacker is a linebacker that protects the center of the field, and doesn't usually rush the quarterback. So the ultimate kind of surveyor of the field, the center fielder of the linebackers. Now, does that necessarily mean that you have to be a middle linebacker? No. You could play left inside, you could play right inside, you could play right outside or left outside. It doesn't necessarily matter what position you are on the field. The overarching umbrella term is an off-ball linebacker, and that is exactly the mold that Kyzir White would play, which, again, if you're looking at the Broncos sort of, linebacker room, you would note that this is the position that they could use the most depth in. We don't need another pass rusher. We got plenty of those. Number 1 in the NFL last year. So I know we made a video about C.J. Mosley a little bit ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, and it became apparent to me that after reading some of the comments on the channel and going through all of the articles that I was reading about Denver Broncos needs heading into, not only OTAs, but training camp and mini camp, which, by the way, Broncos OTAs second round starts up today. It just seems to me that there is one position that I feel a little uncertain about, and that's that linebacker position. And not to keep beating a dead horse, but the injuries cause me concern. And we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Now, before I get into all of the other players that we're going to talk about that are currently on the Broncos roster, should the Broncos make another free agent signing? Super simple question, yes or no. I know that there's a lot of Broncos fans out there that have already said, we are stacked right now with our current roster the way it is. It's formed great. We just have to let it ride out. And I would agree with you for the most part. I feel like there's one or two other players that we could potentially round out this linebacker room. Now, I want to pay very close attention to this. This is what your current linebacker room looks like right now. Your on-ball linebackers, Benito and Cooper. So take them out of the equation right now. They play a different style of football. I'm looking at Dre Greenlaw and Alex Singleton. And we're going to get to why I have some concerns about them, obviously the injuries being the main one. But the projected deal right now for Kyzir after he signed his 2-year, $10 million deal with the Cardinals a couple of years ago would be a 1-year, $6 million with $3 million guaranteed. That's a very cheap deal for a guy who got you 137 tackles last season, right? Like, we can all agree that this is a very, very underrated signing for whoever gets him. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Broncos. You're getting a player with tons of production for a very, very cheap price. Now, the main question that I'm sure you're wondering right now, what about Justin Strainod and Drew Sanders? And I hear you, and I'm going to talk about him right now because let's be real. These are the two that are currently backing up Dre Greenlaw and Alex Singleton right now. So you might ask yourself or say out loud or ask me even, well, we've got these two other guys, so why do we need another linebacker in here? Well, I'll tell you why in just a moment. But before we get into that, this is the last that we're going to have the Broncos hoodie on sale for you guys on the show. So if you want to get your deal in right now, make sure you use this link that I've put in the comments and description of today's video. It's 40% off. But like I said, this deal is fleeting here on the Broncos Breakdown. We're going to be offering off some other items here in just a little bit, maybe even later today. So if you have the chance and you want to start shopping with Fanatics, use this link that I've put in the comments and description of today's video. Okay, Justin Strainod. So obviously last year, as a backup linebacker, it doesn't get much better than that. And the Broncos re-signed him to a 1-year deal for the 2025 season, kind of like a, hey, we love what you did for us last year. We're willing to ride it out for one more season. So I totally understand where you're coming from. So that leaves Greenlaw, Singleton, and Strainod as the three guys that you're kind of rolling out with. But then there's Drew Sanders. And as a talent and as a player with tremendous upside, Sanders is probably one of the highest as a linebacker in the NFL. There's not many linebackers that have as much potential as he has. The problem is he can't stay healthy. And he's not the only one. Greenlaw still recovering from that strained quad that he suffered while working out. Everything's going to be fine. I'm not worried about his, health at this very moment. But Alex Singleton's coming off of a torn ACL. And Drew Sanders is coming off of a torn Achilles. So 3 out of the 4 players that I've mentioned, besides Kyzir White, in this episode, have all had serious question marks when it comes to what are they going to be able to do off of these injuries. And Greenlaw, okay, it's a strained quad. But if you remember back in that 2023 Super Bowl, that was another major injury concern that caused him to miss the majority of the 2024 season. So that leads me to my question that I'll pose up there as a rhetorical question for me, but ask yourself this out loud right now. Will one of these 3 players get hurt? I'm not advocating for it. I'm not predicting it. I'm not saying that I'm looking forward to, to having to sign a player or trade for a player because one of these 3 players gets hurt. In a perfect world, all of them stay healthy and the Broncos don't have to do a single thing outside of this. But in the event that one of them does get hurt, and that's the law of averages, White would be a great 1-year rental. And that's all he'd be. He'd be a player that could come in, doesn't have to be a starter, could be a rotational piece, kind of like what you had with Justin Strainod, and you just let him battle it out at camp. Figure it out. And if Kyzir White ends up making the roster and becomes a more reliable option, then you could look to trade a potential Justin Strainod or Drew Sanders. Now, again, I'm not saying that's what the Broncos are interested in doing, but it wouldn't make sense from a health standpoint when all 3 of the players, Singleton, Greenlaw, and Sanders, all have serious question marks about their health going forward in their career. So I'll ask you to pick a player. If you had to pick one player to back up Singleton and Greenlaw as that off-ball linebacker, let me know which one that you would have. Strainod, Sanders, or Kyzir White. As of right now, I'll type Strainod. I'll say JS. But Kyzir White, like I said, could be a very cheap, very affordable, and very underrated signing for, $6 million. That leads me into a question that is not necessarily about the linebackers. It is kind of in an indirect way. How many Broncos will finish with 10-plus sacks? Last year, only 2 did it, Cooper and Benito. I'm going to say 3 do it this year. Something tells me that Zach Allen has a 10-sack season in him. Maybe John Franklin Myers as well. Either way, I'm going to say 3 players. I think Benito does it again. I think Cooper does it again. And then a combo of either Franklin Myers or Zach Allen. That's going to do it for us on today's episode. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Like the video and send this to a Broncos fan in your life. My name is Moose. Until next time, and our live show coming up here in just about 5 or 6 hours. Be cool.